Action. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Chemical Man Podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and today I have my wife, Krista, with us today. And she wanted to get together, and we're going to try to do some questions and answers to just try to get some guys prepped for interviews and different things and see what we can come up with here and try to help you out. Anyway, so what you got, babe?
So just for reference, I work in the industry as well. I'm a training coordinator, and I see a lot of people coming in new to the industry, but we get a lot of different people from different backgrounds. So it's not necessarily always experience wins out over new P-Tech degree, school people. It is a variety of people, and it really comes down to, I hear a lot of people ask, well, how do you get the job? Why didn't I get the job? I've got experience. I've got this. It really comes down to the dynamics of the team and what the team needs. So if you got a team that's really relatively young, less than 5 years experience, most likely the next hire is going to be somebody with experience because they need to kind of balance out that experience index. So some of the questions don't always necessarily relate to industry.
So hold on, let's talk about that for a second. So you're saying that if you and I go apply and we don't have any experience, we might get hired this time, but the next class comes around, they say, okay, we've got people with no experience. We need to find people with experience for the next class. Is usually how it happens?
Yeah, because you've got to average out the experience index. So if you're looking at a team of 20 and half of them have less than 2 to 3 years experience, you're going to need to get some experience in there, some people who have some industry knowledge to be able to balance out the how do you handle and troubleshoot problems that come up. When you have very little experience, you need to be able to balance that out with people who have experience. Not necessarily that particular plant experience, but just industry experience in general helps the team as a whole.
So what do you say for the people that are trying to get in and don't have any experience?
Keep trying. We'll get to a space where you'll have a team that has a lot of experience and can have somebody with little experience come in.
Okay.
I have 5 teams in my plant that I work in, and one of my teams has a high level experience, 45 plus year people who have been out there. And those guys can teach you a lot. So we generally will put a new, little experienced kind of person in that space because it gives them the opportunity to learn from the folks that have been out there for a long time.
Okay.
Whereas one of my plants has very little experience, and we can't afford to keep putting little experience in that plant because we're going to continuously have problems and unplanned events. So we're putting people with experience in that particular plant. Okay. So when we hire a group of 7 to 10, maybe 1 or 2 has little experience and they go to one of the plants, and the other 5 will go to a plant who has the need for people with experience.
Okay.
So with that, the questions that come are more generalized to how you interact with people and your personality, more so than your industry knowledge. That makes sense.
That makes sense. I will say one time I worked at one plant, and after our interview, they had us do a psychological test. Something about the way how do we think? Are we more left side of our brain, more right side of our brain? And then when they ask you questions, because what they did that is they said, okay, well, if you're a left brain thinker, you think a certain way versus a right brain, well, we're going to stick you on a shift over here because all y'all kind of work together versus the other kind. And I was always kind of down the middle, so I could go either way on there, and so I got stuck with wherever I was. It was very different. I never experienced anything like that before, but it was something different, and that was wild to experience.
So some of the questions that I know we've asked in interviews, I know that I've talked to other friends and other companies, they've asked similar questions, is describe your experience working in a team environment.
So describe yourself working in a team environment. Okay. That can go a lot of ways. You could say that you work well with others. You could say that you give great input towards the job. You could say that you could just describe a scenario like there was 4 of us on shift one time, and we had a little fire. You could describe what you did for that. It was a small fire on a pump. You could say, well, hey, I went and called the people up front and gave the report while this guy did this there's a scenario there. If you haven't never experienced anything like working with people like that, I mean, we've all worked somewhere like a grocery store or a movie theater or Taco Bell or something. So you're always working around people. So you can always describe your experience working there. Like I was a shift leader and I worked with other people that, we made sure we got the orders right and stuff like that. I mean, I guess that's one thing, huh?
Yeah, I mean, you want to really make sure you're not generalizing yourself and your answers. Your answers should be very specific to scenarios that have happened that you've experienced.
Yes.
So if you just say, well, I work well with others, they're going to be like, okay, and then keep on going. But if you say, I work well with others, there was a situation that happened, and you go into that situation like the pump fire and you kind of explain what your role was and how you interacted with each other, that is going to give you more points, I guess you would say, in the interview process than if you were to just say, oh, yeah, I work well with others. Because they want to see your examples. They want to hear what you have done and how you can relate to working in an environment with a team or group of people.
And everybody's got an example. I mean, we've all worked somewhere. Where we work retail, we worked somewhere, we worked minimum wage jobs. So everybody's got some kind of example they can have. I would believe that everybody's got something, and you can think about that and just tell them. Have a good story. Tell them what you experienced, like she said.
Yep. One of the other questions that I hear a lot is describe a time when you have had a conflict with a coworker and how you have handled that conflict.
That's a 30-year-old question that's been around for a long time. Yeah, and like I said, we've all experienced that. So, like, for example, everybody's had conflicts with their employee, with another employee. I've had conflicts with employees. So the best thing you do is just try to stop the situation. Don't make it any worse. If you're having a confrontation with someone and you can tell that it's getting heated, just be the bigger person and say, all right, man, look, we both need to cool down. We both need to walk away. You just, hey, let's walk away and come back and talk about this later. But if you have someone that just keep pressing, then you just need to like, look, man, leave me alone, walk away, and all that. But a good example is think about if you're married or you have a girlfriend and you get in an argument. How do you address a situation like that? That's a perfect scenario. If you and your wife or you and your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever get in an argument and there's some shouting match there, think about that. How did you handle the situation? Y'all had a blow up, but you came to terms afterwards. Stuff like that. That's a good scenario to think about. It doesn't have to be with a coworker. It can be with someone it could be your best friend. I had a conflict with my best friend. You can think about things like that. Everybody's had some kind of conflict, and you can relate that to the scenario they asked. I mean, would you agree on that? Or
absolutely.
Yeah.
Your situations that you can draw from in life don't necessarily have to be plant specific.
Correct.
They can be from how you've interacted with people on your child's baseball team or how you've handled situations at the grocery store when you've had someone coming up to you and getting in your business or in your face. Like
Correct.
All of those kind of situations can easily relate to interview questions. Especially if you don't have industry experience. So I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't have any industry experience, so I can't relate to these questions. They're not necessarily industry specific. These questions are more behavioral specific and personality specific. So how are you handling conflict? Are you the bigger person or are you being the hothead that's going off on somebody? That's really what we're trying to determine to find out who's the best fit for this group.
Yeah, how you work well with others is basically the question there.
Yep. So one of the other questions is describe a situation where you had to follow instructions from a supervisor, an engineer, or technical advisor, or someone else that you essentially disagreed with, but still had to follow those instructions. How would you handle that situation?
Well, the first thing I would handle the situation is I would ask for I'd clarify what they're asking. Like, what are you really asking here? Let's talk about this. Let's discuss what you're wanting to do, and try not to get heated in a heated argument about it. There's been times that people come to me or come to us at work and say, hey, we want to do X, Y, Z, and we try to tell them, man, that's already been done before. Well, I don't care, I want to do it, and you try to talk to them. Well, let me show you why it happened this way. Let me show you why we don't do it that way anymore. And then sometimes you have to just back off and say, if that's what they want, then you're gonna just have to you're just gonna have to do it. I know. Remember, it is a job. You're there to provide for your family, make money. So you're just gonna have to do it. And then if it blows up or something, I'm not saying the plant blows up. I'm just saying if something happens and you've told them, then you could write it down. Hey, man, I told you this happened here. This is gonna happen here, and then you talk about it. But I mean, I've seen too many people where somebody's come and asked them a question to do something, and I'm probably one of them too. And you get hot-headed and you try to say, no, that's not going to work. It's going to work. I've learned after all these years being older, just let's talk about it. What do you want to do and why you want to do that? And let's sit here and talk about this. I mean, what do you?
So I think the big thing is being honest and asking the right questions, and not being argumentative of, I'm not going to do that because I don't feel like we should do that. But more so as, can you help me understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? So when you get asked that kind of question in an interview, they're looking for someone who is willing and open to change, willing and open to hearing another point of view. They're also looking for someone who is going to ask those clarifying questions to make sure that we're doing things safely. Correct. So we're not going to just blindly take somebody's suggestion and say, oh yeah, okay, I'll do that. I don't know if they've done all the right paperwork. I don't know if they've done all the right things to make this an approved change. I'm just going to go with it because they told me to do it. They're looking for, are you asking the right questions to keep people safe, but are you also being open and willing to hear a different point of view and a different way of doing something?
Yeah, that's a very good answer. Yeah, take it from her. That's a very good answer on there. So what else you got?
So the next question is, tell me about a time that you made a mistake and how you handled that mistake.
I got asked this. I remember this one a long time ago. Okay. So let me think about this. I got several. All right. So let's see. There was one time this was a long time ago. I was working at a batch plant, and we were filling the drums up, and the drum overfilled. So we had to clean up and all that stuff. So they asked me what happened. I said, man, I was standing out there. Back in the day, this was all physical. You had to actually put the nozzle in the in the drum. You had to tear the weight, and you have to wash the weight and on there. And man, it's you're out there 12 hours drumming, so time gets away from you. It gets hot, it gets horrible. So I just had to say, hey, look, I turned away for a minute. I wasn't paying attention. The scale got over, it spilled a little bit. I was able to catch it in time. I was able to tell you we got clean up, that. And so we went to the point where we had to get two people out there watching instead of one. One would stay on the forklift to move the pallets while the other one would watch. That way you always had a backup. So it was good. Instead of having one person do the job, you ended up getting a second person to help you out and do that. There was one time where I was working somewhere else, and we were filling up a rail car, and we had a meter. And then the meter, you would set the meter on it, and you say, I want to add X amount pounds to this rail car. And when the meter goes, and then when it gets to those pounds, it would stop, and then it would stop filling the rail car at that time. The meter messed up, and it overflowed, and it overflowed the rail car, so we had to get out there and look at that. But we learned that the meter failed, and then we were able to pinpoint what the problem was, and then find a solution and go from there. So there's always scenarios. But if you don't have anything like that in a plant environment, you can come up with you can think about other things in life, Everybody's helped their mom or dad around the house. Something's broke. What did you come up with a solution, If you're jumping off the roof with an umbrella to try to do Mary Poppins and you break your arm, you can come up with some kind of scenario that you did when you were a kid, and describe what happened and go from there. But there's always something you can think of. Everybody's experienced stuff in life, and you can take what you've experienced in life and talk about that in the interview and make that to what they're looking for. They're just trying to find something that you've done and you fixed a solution or you fixed a problem, whatever happens. It doesn't have to mean you worked in a chemical plant. You have to describe that you stop a pump from overheating because it was left blocked in. There's things you can happen. Your mom's cooking something or you're boiling water on the stove and you forget about it and boil the water over the pot, and or you're cooking something and you catch fire in a pan because how do you put the fire on the pan? Throw some baking soda, throw a towel on it, something like that. So you can come up with scenarios to talk in the interview.
Yeah, the big thing is owning the mistake and explaining how you took that mistake and made it a learning opportunity or an improvement for the organization or for the group that you're working
Correct.
in. So we learned something from this mistake, and we were able to then make an improvement so that mistake wouldn't happen again, or we could minimize the risk of it happening again.
Correct.
When you have those examples available to be able to say, well, this is what I did, I learned from it, and in the future we did X, Y, and Z to not have that happen again, that is going to be a good answer for that kind of question. When you go in and say, I don't really make mistakes, immediately you're a red flag that people are going to be like, no.
Everybody makes mistakes
we all make
in life. You just have to, everybody makes mistakes in life. Nobody is perfect. If you are, I would like to meet you, and I would like to talk to you, and the chair is available for you if you are. I agree with that. But you got to think about just life experience in general. You've never worked in a plant, never worked in a refinery, never worked in construction. You just think about things that have happened to you in life for those kind of questions.
Yeah, so you will have a few questions that are generated around the industry knowledge. But most of your questions are going to be behavioral-based questions, and they're going to be character-based questions. So who are you as a character? What kind of character do you have? Do you have a character of quality, integrity? Do you have examples that show who you are as a person? Or do you have examples that are just generated around, well, I heard, on Google that if I get asked this question, this should be my generic answer. That's really going to be the red flags, right?
Yeah. You can't, four of y'all can't come in there and say the same answer because all y'all got together and y'all came up with a good thing. So, she can't go before me and say, and then I come behind her and say, and they're like, wait a minute, do y'all know each other? Do y'all talk to each other? Because both y'all have the same scenario on there too.
You will have questions around how you handle, changes in your shift and changes in your schedule. Those are, again, behavioral-based questions that people want to know. People are wanting to see that you can handle if you're going into a plant with a DuPont schedule, you're going into a plant with a 4-4-4, you're going into a plant with a 7 on, 7 off. That's a change in your schedule. You don't have consistency. So you are on days, you're on nights, you're off, your weekends are always different. They're going to want to see that you have the ability to be flexible with that. It can be a challenge, and they're going to ask you questions about your life that's going to give them insight. There are some do's and don'ts when it comes to interviews that you can and can't do. And so they can't ask you things like your age or, personal questions.
Can't age discriminate.
But they are going to ask questions that will help read between the lines to get an understanding of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
We've hired people that are older, more experienced in the industry, and they've been great fits for our organization. But it hasn't been because of what we've asked them outright. It's been because of the things and the experiences that they've had to offer the organization. It goes back to what I said originally, which is if you're the right fit for the organization, then they are going to select you.
Correct.
So it's not necessarily that you're not getting the job, it's that you're not getting the right job for you. If you go into a group that is not right fit for you, you most likely are not going to be successful.
Yeah. And it doesn't really hurt if you know some people too, because if they can give you a good word, they can vouch for you. It helps you on that too if you know some people. I know that's how a lot of people lately have been getting hired in. It's like they'll do reference of other people on there. Now I know some places will do interviews and they'll have scenarios. So they'll have like a picture of something and they'll ask you to describe it, or they'll have like Like I think one of them's used a radiator, like for a cooling tower, and they'll ask you, how stuff like that. I interviewed one place one time. Our whole interview process was questions and answers and how to figure out stuff. One of them was they had, and some people out there might be thinking, but they have little buckets with little pumps on the buckets, and they sit there and they give you a scenario. Okay, you need to transfer so much material from this bucket to this bucket and keep the line here and make sure this level stays here. And there was 4 of us, and we had to work as a team to wash the pumps and do that. And then after that, then we had to go outside, and they had us roll up hoses and then carry fire extinguishers and walk up flights of stairs. And then they showed us, okay, you carry your fire extinguisher with your right hand. When you walk over there, you put it down. When you turn, you grab with your right hand again. People go out there, put it down didn't follow the rules, put it down, grab with their left hand, walk away. They're trying to see if people can follow what they've been told to do, and I don't really like that per se, but I mean, I guess it helps on there.
But I think every company in our industry has some type of aptitude test.
They
So
do.
it's either an online test, but that test has to be passed before you even get to the interview section.
There are a lot of them like that. I know ours at one time had that. You had to pass a test before you even get the interview. Back in the day, I remember going to places, you'd be 1,000 people that are taking a test. The test just weeds the people out, man. If they don't pass a test, it weeds you out, and then you got 1,000 people, it weeds you down to like 500, and then from there it weeds you down to how many you need on there.
So there's one more question that I remember I got asked in my interview process, and that I've heard a lot of other companies ask as well. And it's, if you walk by somebody who is doing something unsafe,
that is a question that gets
what
asked a lot.
what do you do? How do you react? What do you say?
Yeah, or like if you walk by somebody not using your PPE, what do you do? If they're over on the right, you look left and say, "Oh, I didn't see them." No. That is a very good question to ask. Now, I know how I've asked it. And I've gone up to people and say, "Hey, look, man, you should be wearing your PPE out there. It's safe for you, safe for me, safe for everybody on there." That's basically what I've always said. It's like, well, if I see someone not wearing their PPE, I try to go up to them. I try to talk to them and say, "Hey, man, you might want to wear your PPE." If they get disgruntled or they tell me, it's none of your business, then you're like, "Hey, man, look, I'm trying to help you out to help you keep your job on there because I like working with you." If they keep getting mad, well, then you're gonna have to either let them figure it out or you're gonna have to take it up the chain. But I hate to be that person that has to go run tell that. But you want to make sure they're working correct.
My go-to answer is always play stupid. You always play stupid by saying, "Hey, has there been some kind of change to the PPE grid that tells us that we don't have to have, earplugs in this area, or that we don't have to have hard hats, or that we don't have to have FRCs on? Like, did something change that I'm not aware of?" Because when I go in with that kind of question, they usually look at me like, "No." And I can immediately say, "Okay, well, my understanding is that we are supposed to be wearing whatever we're supposed to be wearing." And inevitably, that usually gets people's attention and says, you know what, they're right. I'm going to go take care of what I need to take care of. So my answer has always been in that kind of I play stupid approach where I go up and ask the question where I know the answer, but I'm asking that question anyways because I want to see if they're going to own up to the fact that they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or if we're going to have a higher conversation, a harder conversation, so to speak.
Yeah, I would rather a fellow employee come talk to me and get on to me about doing something wrong versus a boss. Yeah, it might make me mad because so and so does some of the same stuff too. But at the long run, I would rather have an employee come up to me and say, "You're not doing your job right. Put your PPE on." And go from there versus a boss or someone else because it's just easier in the long run to have stuff like that.
Yeah, so if you're asked that kind of question in the interview process, the real answer needs to be, I'm not going to allow it to continue. I'm going to say something. I'm going to do something. I'm going to have a conversation, whether it be a hard conversation or not. If it's a boss or a leader that's out there and you're going to have that conversation with them, you got to have that conversation.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who it is. If you're going to keep somebody safe, whether it is somebody who is who works side by side with you or is higher up in the chain of command than you still have to have that conversation. So your interview question, if you get asked that kind of question, your answer should be, I'm going to do what keeps people safe.
Yeah. Yeah, listen to her. She's got better stuff than me. But so let me ask you this. Okay, so some people have asked lately, like when they fill out their job stuff, and it says salary desired. What do you think they should put in there?
Well, that's a hard question
It is a hard
because
question.
it depends on if you're applying for a company that's a union that has a union contract, then that's already predetermined.
Yeah.
So there's not really a lot of wiggle room with that. Like,
But I mean, what do you think you should put?
well, it should be to be determined.
I would say put negotiable.
Yeah.
I think that's a good word to put in there is negotiable, because I mean, or put close to what you're already making now. You know, if you're making 15, 16 bucks an hour, put something like that, because they're going to pay you when they go in there anyway. But there's some people, but if you put in there, your desired is $300,000 a year, man, they're going to just throw you out.
Yeah.
We're like, no, throw this guy out to the curb. Let's go to the next guy down here.
You should never put a true monetary value unless you know exactly what that monetary value is. Like I said, if it's a union company or a union contract, that rate is already negotiated and you're going in with whatever the contract says.
Yeah.
If it's a company that doesn't have a union behind it, then that company most likely already has a negotiated rate for that particular role. So I know in our company we have job levels, and so the non-union plants have job levels that go from 2 to 14, and you come in at a specific job level with that rate already kind of determined. So there's not a lot of negotiating that happens when it comes to like an operator role, but you should never put in there, like he said, $300,000 and blow them out of the water, because you're probably not even going to get to the interview phase.
Yeah.
You're probably going to get your resume pulled out just from the fact that you are being unrealistic to what the job role pays.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So just think about that, because that's been asked for a couple times too. A couple people have asked me about on that one. All right, what else? You got any other questions?
I would say the only other thing that I would like to address is something you touched on earlier, which is that it doesn't hurt if you know someone in the industry. Getting references to jobs and companies really does help, especially in this area where we have so many people looking for jobs and we have so many companies around the area. We often take referrals first.
They do. I know at our plant they do. They always ask us first, if you know anybody or you can refer anybody, let them know. Now, I'm not just going to refer anybody that I don't know. If I think you're a good employee, I'll refer to you, because last thing I need to do is refer somebody and the next thing you know they get fired because they're not paying attention, or they're out there making TikToks out there trying to show you how to wash your car. Yes, we've had that happen out there.
So I think that's the big thing is if you know people in the industry and they know who you are, then start talking to them seriously about you wanting to be in this industry, you wanting to get a job, or you're looking for your next job, and really, showing them examples in your life about what type of employee you are.
Yeah, and if you're in school, there's a lot of professors out there that worked in the industry or
do work in the industry,
are still in the industry, and you can talk to them and say, I definitely talk to them, because I work with some guys that they have their professor worked over there at a plant one time, and they were able to get them on. I've definitely talked to people like that. So don't look at all your options out there. Don't and I understand you apply, you keep applying, you just keep getting frustrated because you're like, I want a job. But maybe the right job's not there for you, like you said earlier. I understand. You just got to keep applying. You got to keep doing the best you can. You got to keep taking the tests when the tests are available. You just got to keep doing what you can. I know it's frustrating. I get it. But in the long run, it will be good. And if you have to start at a lower plant, start at a lower plant. And if there's something maybe outside of the Houston area or outside of the Gulf Coast area, look at that. I know some people don't want to leave their family, but man, if you have to go work over here for a while to get some experience and then come back, you can do things like that too on there.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is you take what you can get when you can get it, get the experience, get the knowledge,
Yeah.
and then keep working towards the next job. So if your end job or end goal is to be at that Shell, Exxon, Chevron kind of level, then but you're not getting the interviews, take the interviews you are getting, take the jobs that you are getting offered, and then take the time to gain your experience and your knowledge, and that gives you a little bit further foot in the ladder or foot up the ranks before you can get to the next job.
That's very true. Yeah, I mean, we all have to start out somewhere, and I get it. We don't want to start on the bottom, but sometimes you have to and work your way up. I know I've done it, and a lot of other people have too on there, but just try not to get discouraged. Just, it's going to happen, and you keep doing it, and I'm hoping that this video will help some people out there for interviews and stuff like that, to what to look for and how to answer and different things like that. And do you have any other questions that you've heard or you want to ask?
No, I think the other thing is just for those with experience and that are trying to leave their company, go to another company, again, same kind of advice, give those honest answers. When you have experience and you have presented that on your resume, but you don't give any examples in your interview questions that are relevant to your experience, that is kind of a red flag. So make sure that you're making those relevant connections to the job that you're interviewing for next. We understand that in this industry, it's not always staying with the same company for 40 years anymore. Some people go to the next best company, the next best step up for them and their family. And, if you get frustrated because you're not getting the next job that you want, think about those questions and those personality trait questions and make sure that you're making them relevant experiences, relatable experiences to what you've done in the industry. For those who don't have the industry experience, find relatable ways to connect with your life experiences, whether it be your family, your friends, extracurricular activities you do outside of work or school. But make those connections because that's a big key to being successful.
It is. It really is. And let me another thing ask you here. So if you get an interview, let's ask, what do you think you should wear to your interview? What would be appropriate clothes to wear for your interview?
Well, so in our industry, it would not be odd to see somebody in blue jeans and a nice button-down shirt.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You don't have to wear. You don't need to be wearing a suit.
I wouldn't
tie.
go in a t-shirt.
No.
If you have a cap on, I would take your cap off during the interview if possible. Even if it's on, if it's a Skype interview or a Teams meeting interview. Wear a nice shirt. You could be in shorts because they're not going to see.
I would avoid wearing your blues, your FRs. I would avoid wearing, your old T-shirt that you go fishing in. I would wear nice, I'd wear your blue jeans and a nice button-down shirt. Correct. Or a nice polo style shirt. Yeah. But it's not uncommon to see people in jeans and a nice polo. It would be odd if you walked in a suit and tie because that's just not our industry. Even our leaders don't wear suits and ties unless they have, someone from a global team coming to visit. So I wouldn't expect to see somebody walking in a suit and tie, but I would expect them to be presented nicely. So nice jeans and a nice shirt would be appropriate.
Yeah, definitely. Just something nice. Not what I'm wearing.
For ladies, I wouldn't expect them to be in a dress or anything like that. Again, just some nice pants and a nice blouse for ladies that are interviewing, but nothing fancy, just appropriate for the job that you're going for.
So I'm going to ask one more question here. So this gets asked a lot. Have you heard anything, if anybody has on the record, is that automatic fail? If they have anything on their record when they do a background check? Like
a criminal record?
Correct.
So it depends on the record.
If they have a DUI, have you heard anything like that?
I mean, it can be a red flag for companies, and depending on the company policy, it can kick them out.
Okay.
It just is determined. It is dependent on what the company's policy is. Yeah. So each company has their own policies in regards to what they find acceptable or not acceptable. And so, there are certain things that are considered not acceptable when it comes to criminal background. If it is a speeding ticket, maybe not such a red flag.
Yeah.
If it's a DUI or, domestic violence kind of situation, then that might might trigger them to be kicked out. You really have to be careful because there are background checks that happen. And
Correct.
depending on the company's own policies, which they don't disclose to everyone, like our company, I don't even know our company's policies.
I
when it
have no
comes to
idea
that.
our company's policy. I couldn't tell you yay or nay. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you if somebody was in prison they got hired. I don't know. I can't find that anywhere. So I mean,
But they do have their own
they do.
policies.
They do.
And it just is dependent upon what each company
That is
deems to
correct.
be.
So if you have something on your background, 9 times out of 10, it could be keeping you from getting the job on there, depending on what it is. Speeding ticket, I couldn't see stuff like that. But if you're out, but I can see a domestic violence, or I can see if you've been in jail, or if you see in prison, I could see something like that happening. If you got a gun charge, anything like that.
But that also goes for social media posts as well.
Yeah, it does. In this world now, it does.
You do need to be mindful that, they're not necessarily like, I don't know about our company, but I do know that some people are going to look at social media posts. They're going to look at your profile picture and they're going to be like, who is this person? And if they're seeing something that maybe would be a red flag, then if it's between you and one other person, they're going to take the person that doesn't have the red flag. So
That is true too.
when you're when you're going through interview processes, you need to think about how you're presenting yourself from the whole picture, not just from the actual interview, but how you presented yourself during the phone conversation with the first initial interview screening, how you presented yourself during the face-to-face interview, how you're presenting yourself online and social media, how you're presenting yourself to people around you, and what references have to say about you. All of these things come into play. Because if you have 4 or 5 pieces of the puzzle and they all have little red flags here and there, again, those red flags are going to be what tips the scale for the person who has none versus the person who has a bunch.
Yep.
You just
Yeah,
have
that's
to be
true.
mindful that you're selling yourself, and you need to be selling yourself in a positive way and in a way that people are going to be interested in seeing more of, and not be like, I think we've seen enough.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Well, hey, look, we just wanted to come on here, and hopefully some of this will answer some questions for you guys. If you have any other questions, please leave a comment. Please send us an email. Let us know. We're here to help any way we can, to try to help you succeed in life. Anyway, subscribe, share. We're going to be across the social media platforms on there if you have any questions. So I want to thank my wife, Krista, again for coming on. Say goodbye. And if you guys have any other questions, let us know. And hopefully we'll have another one out soon. And y'all have a good day. All right. Peace.